acting poor and naive in front of my daughter-in-law's rich folks. The jaw-dropping outcome. My daughter-in-law's rich parents have been judging my family for months, so I decided to give them exactly what they expected. I walked into their home, acting like I'd never seen a spiral staircase. The condescending looks, the helpful hints, the pressure. It was suffocating. My own daughter-in-law, Emma, looked horrified. They thought they were embarrassing me. Little did they know I was setting a test, and the results were about to cause the most shocking family dinner meltdown of all time.
Hey, store lover. Welcome to the Narrative Hub, Reddit Stories. Believe me, this adventure gets wild, but it's only epic with you. Seriously, you make this possible. Want more stories? Greater adventure? Smash subscribe right now. Smash like. Comment below. Let's go.
The heavy oak door clicked shut behind me, the sound swallowed by the cavernous marble foyer. The air smelled of lilies and old money. My son, James, offered a weak, supportive smile, but his eyes were tight with anxiety. Emma, his wife, wouldn't look at me at all. She was already mentally calculating the damage. "Margaret, so glad you could. Find the place," Barbara Gonzalez said, gliding toward me. Her voice was smooth as silk and just as thin. She was draped in a navy blue dress that probably cost more than my car, the real car I'd left at home, not the sputtering 10-year-old sedan I'd taken the liberty of borrowing from a friend for this occasion. Her husband, Anthony Wilson, stood by the massive, winding staircase I was meant to be impressed by. He didn't move, just sized me up from behind a pair of gold-rimmed glasses, his gaze lingering on the scuffed toes of my sensible shoes. "Barbara, Anthony, thank you for having me," I said, pitching my voice to sound just a little breathless, a little overwhelmed. I clutched the strap of my worn, brown purse. "My goodness, what a room! It's just like a movie." Barbara's lips twitched in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "How quaint. Come, let's get you a drink. You must be parched after the drive." The implication hung in the air. The drive from the poor side of town. James shifted. "Mom, let me take your coat." "Oh, thank you, dear," I said, slipping off the faded, pilled cardigan. It was clean, but I'd spent an hour selecting it for its specific air of washed too many times. Barbara's eyes scanned it, and a look of profound, almost theatrical pity crossed her face. "Oh, goodness, Emma, darling," she called. "Perhaps we can find your mother-in-law a wrap. The drafts in this old house can be dreadful." Emma, my poor, trapped daughter-in-law, turned a shade of crimson I hadn't seen since her wedding day. "Mother, she's fine. It's vintage." "Of course it is, dear," Anthony said, finally speaking. His voice was a low baritone accustomed to giving orders. "Shall we move to the conservatory before dinner?" He turned and walked away, not waiting for an answer. We were expected to follow. The conservatory was a jungle of exotic plants, all blooming perfectly out of season. We sat on white wicker furniture with plush cushions. A server in a crisp uniform, who I noted was doing his best to remain invisible, poured sparkling water. "So, Margaret," Barbara began, leaning forward as if sharing a secret, "Emma tells us you're retired." "Oh, just about," I chirped, fumbling slightly as I picked up the heavy crystal glass. "I keep busy, my garden, you know, and I volunteer at the library." "How lovely," Barbara said, sharing a quick, tight glance with Anthony. "We believe in giving back, too. In fact, Anthony just pledged $500,000 to the museum's new wing. It's so important to support the arts." Anthony grunted, sipping his drink. "It's a write-off. Now, James, this. Sculpting, is there an end goal there? Are you selling these things?" James stiffened, his knuckles white on his own glass. "I have a few gallery showings, Anthony. It's not about the money." "It's never about the money for people who don't have it," Anthony said, not unkindly, but as one stating a simple, irrefutable fact. "But now you have Emma to think of. We were discussing, weren't we, Barbara? Offering you a position in logistics, at the firm, real-world work, a stable salary, benefits." "Father," Emma cut in, her voice sharp, "we've talked about this. James is an artist. I respect his work." "Respect doesn't pay a mortgage, Emma," Barbara said, patting her daughter's hand. "We just worry we see you too in that tiny apartment, And with Margaret's situation, we know she can't be of much help. We simply want to provide. It was a perfectly crafted attack. It positioned them as generous saviors and me as a useless, impoverished burden. The pressure was immense. I could feel James vibrating with suppressed anger next to me, and Emma looked like she was about to cry. This, I thought, is the test, and they are failing spectacularly. That's awful kind of you, I said, my voice trembling slightly. I've always just wanted James to be happy. I don't have much, but I taught him to follow his dreams. Dreams are for children, Margaret, Anthony said. Adults deal in reality, and the reality is my daughter is accustomed to a certain standard of living. Dinner is served, the invisible server announced, his timing saving Emma from having to respond. The dining room was even more opulent. A long, polished mahogany table reflected the light of a crystal chandelier. There were, I counted, 4 forks and 3 knives at each setting. This was the arena. I accidentally reached for the wrong water glass. "Oh no, dear," Barbara corrected, her voice dripping with pity. "That one's mine. Yours is on the right." "Oh heavens, I'm so sorry. So many glasses." Then, as the salad was served, I made my move. I purposefully picked up the tiny seafood fork. Anthony paused, his own fork halfway to his mouth. He watched me rake at a piece of lettuce with the tiny tines. He didn't say anything. He just looked at Barbara, and the smallest, ugliest smirk played on his lips. They were in this together. They were the insiders, and I was the peasant at the gate. "Mother," Barbara whispered, loud enough for the entire table to hear, Is she always like this?" "Mother," Emma hissed, mortified, "stop it." "We're just concerned," Barbara said, turning to me. "Margaret, dear, that's the fork for well, not for the salad. Use the larger one, like this." She demonstrated, her movements slow and patronizing, as if teaching a toddler. I put the fork down, my face burning with feigned embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, it's all so fancy." Anthony let out a short, dry laugh. He changed the subject, turning to James. "Speaking of reality, son, my firm is in the middle of the biggest deal of its life. The new waterfront development, you've read about it." James nodded. "It's a huge project." "Huge doesn't begin to cover it," Anthony said, his chest puffing out. "It's a cutthroat world, Margaret, you wouldn't understand. We're talking 9-figure contracts, logistical nightmares, competitors who would slit your throat for a piece of the pie. In fact, we're head-to-head with some new, ruthless investment group. Anonymous. Goes by Capital. They're trying to outbid us, but they don't have the infrastructure. They're just money. We're legacy." I took a sip of water, carefully using the correct glass this time. Capital, that sounds forceful. "It's just a name. They're amateurs," Anthony dismissed. "By the time I'm done, they'll be lucky to get out with their shirts. They submitted a preliminary bid, but it's flawed. Lacks the 10% public arts guarantee the city council is leaning toward." "Oh," I said, setting my glass down. "A public arts guarantee, like statues and fountains." "Among other things," Anthony said, clearly bored. "That's what James does," I said, brightening. "He's an artist, maybe he could do the statues." The silence that followed was absolute. It was, I had to admit, the most perfectly naive and idiotic thing I could have possibly said. Anthony stared at me. Barbara closed her eyes, as if in physical pain. Emma just dropped her head into her hands. Anthony finally spoke, his voice ice-cold. "Margaret, this is a $400 million urban renewal project. We're not talking about a birdbath for the town square. We're talking about legacy, about power, about things well, as I said, you wouldn't understand." "That's the final straw," Barbara said, slamming her hand on the table, making the silverware jump. "This is a farce. Emma, James, this is what you've married into. This simplicity. We are offering you a lifeline. We are offering to buy you a condo in our building. We will set up a trust for your future children. We will save you from this." "Save us." James's voice was dangerously quiet. "Yes, from this," Barbara gestured wildly at me. "From a life of second-hand cardigans and not knowing which fork to use. From a life where your mother thinks a multi-million-dollar arts initiative is a job for James. The mask was off. The polite insults were gone. This was the rich mask cracking, just as I'd planned. This was the grit. The cutthroat competitiveness wasn't just in Anthony's boardroom. It was right here at his dinner table, and I was the prey. Emma shot to her feet. I will not let you talk about her like that. Sit down, Emma, Anthony commanded. Your mother is right. This charade is over. Either you and James accept our help, the job, the condo, or you are on your own. We will not have the Wilson family name dragged through the mud by association. All eyes turned to me. I was the fuse. I was the problem. They were giving their children an ultimatum based entirely on the pathetic, poor performance I had delivered. I slowly, deliberately placed my napkin on the table. I looked up, and for the first time that night, the fog of bumbling confusion vanished from my eyes. The charade, I repeated, my voice no longer breathless but clear and cold as the water in their crystal glasses. You're right, Anthony, the charade is over. The shift in tone made everyone freeze. I beg your pardon, Barbara whispered, her bravado faltering. I turned to Anthony. A $400 million project, you said? That's a rounding error. The Capital bid wasn't flawed, it was strategic. Anthony's face went from smug to confused. What? What do you know about the bid? I reached into my old, brown purse, the one they'd all dismissed. I pulled out a sleek, dark gray smartphone and a small, leather-bound notebook. I tapped the screen, and a financial ticker glowed to life. Your bid, Anthony, is for $450 million, with a 5% arts budget you plan to fight in committee, I said, reading from my notebook. It's sloppy. Capital, on the other hand, submitted a sealed bid this morning for $452.5 million. Anthony's face went white. That's proprietary information. How could you? I didn't get the information, Anthony, I said, standing up. I wrote it. I tapped my chest. Margaret Mitchell, as in Margaret Mitchell Capital. I am the ruthless new investor you've been whining about. The meltdown began. Barbara let out a small, strangled gasp. Anthony looked like I'd struck him. You're lying, he sputtered. Am I? I turned to James. James, what did I tell you I did for a living? James, looking as stunned as his in-laws, stammered. You said you managed properties, that you were a logistician. After Dad died, you built a small company. I did, I said, smiling at him. It just grew. I sold it to a tech conglomerate 4 years ago for a sum that would make your father-in-law's $500,000 pledge look like a tip. I've been a private equity investor ever since. I just don't like to broadcast, unlike you, Barbara. I let my gaze travel over her diamonds. This faded cardigan, it's a 1960s runway original. This worn purse, it's bespoke. I wear them because I like them, not because I need to prove I can afford them. Barbara was speechless. I turned back to Anthony. The test, as I called it, wasn't for me. It was for you. I came here tonight to see who my son and my wonderful daughter-in-law were tied to. I wanted to see if you were just, wealthy, or if you were unkind. And you, Anthony, and you, Barbara, you are the most deeply, profoundly cruel people I have ever had the misfortune of sharing a meal with. Emma had tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. A wild, liberated smile. Now, as for the waterfront deal, I continued, the ultimate cutthroat moment upon me. You're right, my bid is flawed, it was missing something. The arts guarantee, Anthony whispered, his mind clearly racing. No, it was missing a visionary. I looked at my son, whose shaping clay was a joke to these people. Anthony, you're out. As of 9 a.m. Monday, Capital is withdrawing its bid. You can't, he shouted, his composure gone. That'll send the project into default, the city will. The city will do nothing, I said, cutting him off. Because I'm not just withdrawing. I'm transferring the entire $452.5 million bid, the funding, and the 10% infrastructure guarantee, which I personally wrote into a new holding company. I pulled a single, heavy, cream-colored business card from my purse and slid it across the mahogany table. It spun and stopped directly in front of James. "Congratulations, James," I said. "You're the new majority partner for the Waterfront Arts and Redevelopment Initiative. You're in charge of the entire public arts program. You'll hire who you need to handle the logistics." James stared at the card, then at me. "Mom, I don't know anything about." "You know about art," I said softly. "You know about community. That's more than he ever did. You'll learn the rest. You'll hire people, smart people, people who, unlike your father-in-law, will now report to you." The jaw-dropping outcome had landed. Anthony had sunk into his chair, his face a mottled, pale gray. Barbara was visibly shaking, staring at me as if I were a ghost. Emma walked around the table. She didn't go to her mother. She didn't go to her father. She walked straight to James, wrapped her arms around his neck, and kissed him. "Well," I said, picking up my old coat, "this has been revealing. Thank you for the salad." I turned and walked out of the dining room. I heard James and Emma scramble to their feet behind me. As I reached the massive foyer, I didn't feign awe at the spiral staircase. I just walked toward the door. James grabbed my arm. "Mom, Capital, why? Why didn't you ever tell me?" I smiled, patting his cheek. "I wanted you to follow your dreams, James, not my money, and you did." Emma stood beside him, her eyes shining. "That was the most incredible thing I have ever seen." "They failed the test, Emma," I said, my voice gentle again. "You didn't." I opened the heavy front door. The cool night air felt good. I paused, looked back at the two of them, and then at the two frozen, shattered figures still visible in the dining room, their perfect world completely and irrevocably upended. "Coming?" I asked. James and Emma looked at each other, then back at the house, then at me. They walked out the door, and we didn't look back.